Alright, so I am doing Ex-Mormons. And first of all, I just want to say I know this might be a touchy subject for a lot of you. Some of you might know an ex-Mormon, some of you are Mormons, so I really try to keep that in mind and try to make it as neutral as possible. Alright, so who are they?
That's a good way to start. Nice picture.
Alright, so an ex-Mormon is someone who was baptized as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, also known as the Mormon Church, or called LDS for short. And then they decide at a later date to disconnect or leave. The reasons why they leave, they neither believe in it anymore, or there's actually a variety of reasons why they no longer affiliate, and I'll get into that a little bit later. In contrast, I wanted to clarify that I'm not talking about Jack Mormons when I refer to ex-Mormons. Does anyone know what a Jack Mormon is? You guys kind of have a general idea what that means? Okay, so I pulled up this picture because that's what I thought a Jack Mormon was. Someone who believes in the church but doesn't really live the standards and everything. Does that sound right to you guys?
That's a Jack Mormon.
Okay, yeah, that's what I found. That they actually do believe in the doctrine and everything, but they don't live the standards. So they're also known as inactives. Jack Mormon is just like a slang term. But also on that, I found it interesting that the word Jack Mormon was actually originally used to describe someone who wasn't actually baptized in the church, but was just a friend to a Mormon person. So these terms just kind of change over time, so just keep that in mind. But yeah, I'm focusing more on ex-Mormons who actually leave the church. They don't believe in the doctrine. Oh man.
Intro.
Oh,
Controlling.
I really wish that we weren't told if Mormonism doesn't work for you and it doesn't allow you to find happiness and peace, then there's something wrong with you. I had really put all of my eggs into the Mormon basket. I really lived it and I fully embraced it, but I wasn't happy. I was losing myself, I was losing my identity, and I found that I was progressively becoming sadder and more depressed. I can't tell you how many times I was sitting on an airplane hoping that something would happen. I just wanted it to be over. And I thought a plane crash would be a perfect way. It wouldn't embarrass my family. And I thought, you know, Kevin, if you give up, think of all the people you might be able to reach and help and be there for them that are suffering in the same ways that you are and need the same type of support, need the same type of answers. That gave me the courage to push on. That gave me the courage to find out why I couldn't have peace and happiness anymore in being Mormon. And I get to do that now. It was worth every drop of effort it took to make this transition. Shortly after I left Mormonism, I realized that I didn't know what I thought anymore. I didn't know my opinions on so many things because I had subjugated my opinions and my thought processes to the church and what the brethren thought. And I saw wristbands that people wore that had WWJD for what would Jesus do. I had my daughter make me a friendship bracelet, and she put the letters in a WWKD for what would Kevin do? Because I wanted to find out what I thought. And what I learned is that what I thought and what I wanted was good, and was loving, and was effective. I didn't need someone constantly telling me how to be, what to do, what's okay, what isn't okay, what will make me happy, what won't make me happy. That when I just listened to myself and did what Kevin would do, I became much more loving, happy, effective, and filled with peace. One of the most thrilling moments in recent years was sitting on an airplane. I was flying from Salt Lake City to New York. This was about 2 years after I'd left the church. I realized that I didn't want the plane to crash. It had been decades since I was happy. I sat on the airplane and I just cried. I loved being me, And I was excited about my life, about what I was doing. I had peace, I felt happy, and I wanted to live.
My name's Kevin Millay, and I'm an ex-Mormon.
Alright, so I really like that video because it kind of gives a personal experience of someone who had left the church. And obviously everyone's experience would be different. Some people are happy in the church. For him, he wasn't. And the choice to leave was something that brought happiness into his life. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second, but I kind of wanted to test you guys out and see what your ideas were. Because a lot of people have different ideas about why active members end up leaving the church. So out of these 3 reasons, these aren't all the reasons, but out of these top 3, just try to look over them and see what you think is the #1 reason why members leave the church. So the first one, who thinks that they wanted to sin, meaning they wanted to drink, have sex with anyone they wanted to, or have coffee? Anyone? Okay. Who thinks that's because they ceased to believe in the doctrine? Yeah, 5 people, 6. Okay. And who thinks it's because they were offended by someone in the church? Okay, so the majority of you think it's that one. All right, so, and before I tell you the answer, all my information that I got comes from a survey conducted by whymormonsquestion.org. This is actually a website by active members in the church. And they contacted 3,000 participants on online sources, so former LDS websites, forums, podcasts, and blogs. That's how they recruited their participants. And also these participants had higher than average income and education. The data was skewed towards Caucasians who are middle to upper class. 1,000 had left the church within the last 3 years. Not all of them had actually left the church, so out of the 3,000, the majority had, but some still remained in the church with the title, I guess, being a non-believer. So this data that I found really dispels some of the myths about why people leave the church. And so in this survey, the #1 reason was actually they ceased to believe in the doctrine and theology, which I was shocked too, because I had always heard that people leave the church because they're offended for some reason or the other. So, yeah, I already did that part. But, so, these are all the reasons that people reported. Oh wait, okay. I guess I'm gonna do a second. Okay. So these were the top 5 myths of why active members left the church. So they're offended, desire to sin, never had a testimony to begin with, they were lazy, meaning they stopped reading their scriptures and praying, or they studied anti-Mormon literature. And so what this data did in the survey really dispelled a lot of these myths. So these were 21 reasons why people actually left. And as you can see, being offended by someone in the church and wanting to sin was the very lowest reason. I think it was around 4%. So yeah, out of 21 reasons why people leave the church, being offended and desiring to sin came in at the last 2 reasons. Because these reasons only accounted for 4% of responses, they are not accurate in describing why the majority of members leave. The data shows that great percentages of ex-Mormons actually held callings. This is not right here, but other parts of the survey show that they held callings and were very active up until the time they decided to leave. For example, 73% of male respondents were returned missionaries, and more than 50% of the men and 40% of the women actually served in various leadership positions. This also dispels the myth that ex-Mormons never had testimonies or were lazy. Finally, the last myth that I talked about here, that they studied anti-Mormon literature. That's something I always thought was, that's how they end up leaving the church, is because they read all this stuff. But the data actually shows that respondents first began to doubt by reading church literature, for example, the scriptures, church history, journals of early church leaders, and also church publications. And I think after that point they did start reading anti-Mormon literature, but those were the first things that they actually read. So, it was interesting to find out